Rex had solved 247 cases in 6 years of service. His nose had never lied, his instincts had never failed, and his loyalty had never wavered. But none of that mattered as bailiff Tom Jackson approached the witness stand with obvious reluctance, prepared to escort the German Shepherd from courtroom 4A in what appeared to be the most humiliating end to a distinguished career anyone could imagine. "While I respect K9 Rex's service," Judge Patricia Hartwell announced, her words falling like stones into still water, "the defense raises valid concerns about the reliability of K9 testimony. The motion to exclude is granted." The prosecution's case was crumbling. The defendant, bank robber Marcus "Tank" Rodriguez, smiled coldly as his lawyer's strategy succeeded. Rex, confused and hurt, looked to his handler Mike Chen for guidance that wouldn't come. After 6 years of bringing criminals to justice, the veteran dog was being dismissed as just an unreliable animal. But, as Rex passed through the gallery, a small voice from the back row cut through the courtroom noise with laser precision. "He saved me." Every eye turned to see 8-year-old Emma Morrison standing beside her seat, her dark eyes blazing with determination as she stared at the German Shepherd who had once carried her from a burning house. What happened next would vindicate a hero, expose a conspiracy, and prove that justice sometimes wears a badge with 4 legs. The first pale fingers of dawn crept through the grimy windows of the 12th precinct, casting long shadows across the empty bullpen. In the silence that only exists in the hours before the city awakens, Officer Mike Chen sat on his haunches beside his partner, running calloused fingers through graying fur with the tenderness of a father. "Easy, boy," Mike whispered, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't quite name. "Just one more job, one last time." Rex, 8 years old, battle-scarred and magnificent, lifted his dark eyes to meet his handler's gaze. Those eyes had seen things that would break lesser souls: the aftermath of violence, the desperate searches through rubble and smoke, the moment when hope seemed lost, and only a dog's unwavering determination stood between life and death. Now, they reflected a wisdom that came from 6 years of faithful service and the quiet dignity of a warrior facing his final mission. Mike's hands trembled slightly as he prepared Rex's breakfast, the same ritual they'd performed together over 1,000 mornings. But this one felt different, sacred somehow. The kibble clinked against the metal bowl with unusual resonance in the empty station, each sound echoing like a prayer. His gait, from the hip injury that had forced his retirement, he maintained the regal bearing of a German Shepherd who had never known defeat. His coat, once uniformly black and tan, now showed silver at his muzzle and around his wise eyes. Medals of honor earned through years of selfless service. As Rex ate, Mike retrieved the grooming kit from his locker, each tool worn smooth by countless use. The brush moved through Rex's coat with practiced efficiency, working around the scars that told the story of their partnership. The puckered mark on his shoulder from the warehouse shooting, the slight indentation above his left ear from the building collapse on 5th Street, the network of thin lines across his chest from crawling through broken glass to reach a trapped child. "You know what today is, don't you?" Mike's voice caught. Rex paused in his eating, one ear cocked toward his partner. "Court day. Your testimony could put Rodriguez away for life." The name hung in the air between them like smoke. Marcus "Tank" Rodriguez. The man whose scent Rex had followed through 3 miles of city streets, whose trail had led them to the warehouse, where $2.3 million in stolen money waited in duffel bags. The case that was supposed to be Mike's crowning achievement, Rex's final triumph before retirement. Instead, it had become something else entirely, a test of faith, loyalty, and the bond between a man and his partner that transcended species. Mike set down the brush and cupped Rex's graying muzzle in both hands. "I need you to know something, boy. Whatever happens in there today, whatever those lawyers say about you, about us, none of it changes what we've accomplished together. You've saved more lives than I can count. You've brought justice when the system failed. You've been my partner, my friend, my—" His voice broke. Rex pressed his head against Mike's chest, a gesture of comfort as natural as breathing. They sat that way for a long moment, man and dog, in the growing light of dawn. Around them, the station began to stir with the sounds of the day shift arriving. Footsteps on linoleum, coffee brewing, the rustle of newspapers. But in their small bubble of shared silence, time seemed suspended. Finally, Mike stood and clipped Rex's lead to his collar. Not the working harness that had been Rex's uniform for 6 years, but a simple leather lead that spoke of retirement, of a gentler chapter waiting to be written. Rex rose with the careful dignity of age, his movements betraying only the slightest hesitation from his injured hip. As they walked toward the exit, Rex paused at the memorial wall. A collection years ago, while Rex and Mike provided backup. "You remember them all, don't you?" Mike said softly. "Every partner, every loss, every victory. That's what makes you special, Rex. You carry all of us with you." Rex looked up at his handler, then back at the wall, his tail giving another measured wag, not excitement but acknowledgement. Yes, he remembered. Yes, he carried their memory. Yes, he understood the weight of what they were about to face. As they pushed through the station doors into the crisp morning air, Mike felt a sudden chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Rex's ears swiveled forward, alert despite his age, already processing the sounds and scents of the city awakening around them. "Just one more job," Mike repeated, but this time it sounded less like reassurance and more like a plea. "Then we can rest." But deep in his heart, Mike Chen suspected that neither of them would ever truly rest, not until justice was served, not until the last criminal was caught, not until the final life was saved. And Rex, walking beside him with the steady gait of a warrior, seemed to understand that truth better than anyone. The imposing facade of the county courthouse rose before them like a granite monument to justice, its neo-classical columns casting sharp shadows in the morning sun. Mike felt Rex tense beside him as they approached the sea of humanity that surrounded the building. Reporters with their cameras and microphones, protesters carrying signs demanding justice, curious onlookers drawn by the circus-like atmosphere that surrounded high-profile cases. "Easy, boy," Mike murmured, but he felt his own pulse quicken as a forest of microphones thrust toward them. "Officer Chen, is it true that Rex's testimony could make or break this case? How do you respond to defense claims that dog testimony is unreliable? Officer Chen, what will you do if Rex is ruled inadmissible?" Mike pushed through the crowd, Rex staying close to his left heel despite the chaos swirling around them. The German shepherd's ears swiveled constantly, processing the cacophony of sounds, car engines, shouting voices, the electronic whir of television cameras, the rustle of papers in the wind. His nostrils flared as he sorted through the complex bouquet of urban scents, exhaust fumes, coffee, human sweat tinged with excitement and aggression, the metallic smell of fear that always lingered around courthouses. At the security checkpoint, Mike's stomach clenched as he watched Rex submit to the indignity of the metal detector wand. For 6 years, Rex had been treated with the respect due a sworn officer. Now he was being processed like evidence, examined, questioned, his worth debated by strangers who had never seen him work. "Beautiful dog," said the security guard, a middle-aged black man whose name tag read Johnson. "Heard about you two on the news. My nephew's in the K9 unit down in Atlanta." "Thank you," Mike replied, grateful for the moment of humanity. In what felt like a dehumanizing process. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was no less charged. Prosecutor Sarah Williams stood near the elevator bank, her usually immaculate appearance showing signs of stress. A coffee stain on her white blouse, her normally perfect hair slightly mussed. She was deep in conversation with her assistant, their voices low but urgent. "The defense is going to come at us hard," Williams was saying. "They know Rex is our strongest link to Rodriguez. Without his testimony—" She broke off as she noticed Mike and Rex approaching. Her face brightened with genuine relief. "There's our star witness," she said, extending her hand to Mike before kneeling to greet Rex properly. The German shepherd accepted her attention with dignified politeness, his tail giving a brief, professional wag. "How's he doing?" Williams asked, her voice softer now, tinged with concern that went beyond mere professional interest. "He's ready," Mike replied, though his own voice betrayed uncertainty. "But Sarah, I need you to know, this is hard on him. The retirement, the uncertainty about his future. He's been my partner for 6 years. He doesn't understand why he's being questioned now." Williams nodded, her expression growing grim. "The defense attorney is Robert Hayes. He's good, Mike, really good, and he's going to do everything he can to discredit Rex's testimony. You need to be prepared for that." Across the lobby, as if summoned by their conversation, Robert Hayes emerged from the elevator. Tall, silver-haired, and impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Mike's monthly salary, Hayes carried himself with the confidence of a man who had never lost a case he truly cared about winning. His eyes found Rex immediately, studying the German shepherd with the calculating gaze of a predator sizing up prey. Mike felt Rex's muscles tense beneath his hand, the dog's instincts telling him that this man represented a threat. "Magnificent animal," Hayes said as he approached, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Such a shame when age and injury force retirement, isn't it? Sometimes I wonder if we ask too much of our four-legged officers. They can't tell us when they're confused, when their senses aren't as sharp as they once were, when the stress of the job becomes too much." The words were delivered with surgical precision, each one designed to plant seeds of doubt. Mike's jaw clenched, but before he could respond, Hayes had moved on, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor as he headed toward the courtroom. "Bastard," Williams muttered under her breath. The elevator ride to the 4th floor was tense and silent. Rex pressed against Mike's legs, offering comfort even as his own anxiety was palpable. Another wave of activity. The hallway outside courtroom 4A was packed with potential jurors, witnesses, court staff, and more reporters. Mike spotted several familiar faces from the law enforcement community, colleagues who had come to show support, supervisors who needed to see how this would play out, other canine handlers whose own futures might be affected by the outcome. And there, sitting on a bench near the courtroom doors, was a small figure that made Rex's entire body go rigid with attention. 8-year-old Emma Morrison sat beside her mother, her legs swinging slightly as they dangled from the bench. She was small for her age, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and serious brown eyes that seemed too old for her face. In her arms, she clutched a small stuffed animal, a plush German shepherd that bore a striking resemblance to Rex. Emma's eyes found Rex immediately, and Mike watched in fascination as the child's face transformed. The serious, almost sad expression gave way to something approaching wonder, her eyes widening as she took in every detail of the real police dog standing before her. "Mama," Emma whispered, tugging on her mother's sleeve. "Mama, look. It's—" "Hush, Emma," Jennifer Morrison said quickly, glancing around nervously. "Remember what we talked about. We're here to observe, not to participate." But Emma's gaze never left Rex, and Mike noticed that the German shepherd seemed equally fascinated by the child. Rex's ears were forward, his head tilted slightly in the way that meant he was processing something important, trying to make a connection that danced just beyond his reach. "Do you know that little girl?" Williams asked quietly. Mike frowned, studying Emma's face. There was something familiar about her, something that nagged at the edges of his memory like a half-remembered dream. But before he could place it, a bailiff appeared at the courtroom doors. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Hartwell," the bailiff called. As they filed into the courtroom, Mike felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. This was it, the moment that would determine not just the fate of Marcus Rodriguez, but the future of canine testimony, the validation of Rex's career, and perhaps the direction of Mike's own life. Rex walked beside him with the measured pace of experience. But Mike could sense the dog's unease. This wasn't the familiar environment of a crime scene or training facility. This was foreign territory, filled with strange rituals and hostile forces that Rex's instincts couldn't fully comprehend. As they took their seats in the witness area, Mike's hand found Rex's head, fingers working gently behind the dog's ears, in the soothing gesture that had calmed them both through 6 years of partnership. "It's going to be okay, boy," he whispered, but the words felt hollow in the charged atmosphere of the courtroom. In the gallery behind the tighter and whispered a prayer for the real hero, sitting just a few feet away. The dog who had saved her life, even though she didn't yet know that he didn't remember. Judge Patricia Hartwell entered courtroom 4A with the bearing of a woman who had spent 30 years watching the best and worst of humanity parade before her bench. Her silver hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, her black robes flowing behind her as she took her seat beneath the seal of the state. Her gray eyes swept the packed courtroom with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Be seated," she commanded, her voice carrying easily to every corner of the room. "Court is now in session in the matter of the people versus Marcus Antonio Rodriguez." Mike felt Rex shift beside him as the defendant was led in, shackled at wrists and ankles, his orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to the formal attire of everyone else in the courtroom. Marcus "Tank" Rodriguez was exactly what Central Casting would order for the role of career criminal. 6'4", 260 pounds of muscle and menace, with dead black eyes that seemed to assess every person in the room as either threat or opportunity. But it was Rex's reaction that caught Mike's attention. The German shepherd had gone perfectly still, every muscle in his body taut with recognition, and something that looked disturbingly like fear. A low growl rumbled deep in Rex's chest, so quiet that only Mike could hear it. "Easy," Mike whispered, his hand finding the familiar spot behind Rex's ears. "Easy, boy." Rodriguez's eyes found them immediately, and Mike watched the man's face change, surprise giving way to something that might have been respect, then hardening into the cold calculation of a predator recognizing a worthy adversary. The two stared at each other across the courtroom, the battle-scarred police dog who had brought him down, and the criminal who had sworn he would never be taken alive. Prosecutor Sarah Williams rose from her table with the fluid grace of a dancer, her earlier anxiety replaced by the focused intensity of a born trial lawyer. She had changed into a navy blue suit that projected competence and trustworthiness, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Williams began, "on the morning of October 12th at exactly 9:47 a.m., the defendant walked into First National Bank on Commerce Street armed with a Glock 17 and a duffel bag. 43 minutes later, he walked out with $2.3 million in cash, leaving behind 3 traumatized tellers, 2 wounded security guards, and a trail of evidence that would ultimately lead to his capture. She moved to the evidence table, her heels clicking against the polished floor with metronomic precision. The defendant believed he had committed the perfect crime. No fingerprints on the weapon, no DNA evidence left behind, security footage that showed nothing more than a masked figure in generic clothing. He thought he had covered every angle, considered every possibility. Williams paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. But the defendant made one crucial mistake. He underestimated the determination and skill of this witness. All eyes turned to Rex, who sat with military bearing beside Mike's chair. The German shepherd's ears were forward, his dark eyes alert and intelligent, as he seemed to follow every word of the prosecutor's opening statement. This is K9 Officer Rex, badge number 1247, 6 years of distinguished service with the Metro Police Department. On the afternoon of October 12th, while other investigators were still processing the crime scene, Officer Rex picked up a scent trail from the bank's employee parking lot. A trail that would lead his handler, Officer Mike Chen, on a 3-mile journey through the city's maze of streets and alleys, past numerous distractions and false leads, directly to a warehouse on Industrial Boulevard where the defendant had hidden the stolen money. Williams moved to a large display board, revealing a detailed map of the route Rex had followed. Red arrows traced the path from the bank to the warehouse, past dozens of businesses, through 2 parks, across a busy interstate overpass. The prosecution will prove that Officer Rex's tracking ability is not luck, not coincidence, but the result of rigorous training and natural ability honed to near perfection. We will show that Rex has a 94% success rate in tracking suspects, that his nose can distinguish between individual human scents even in crowded urban environments, and that his testimony, delivered through his handler, is as reliable as any human witness. In the gallery, Emma Morrison leaned forward in her seat, her eyes shining with pride as she listened to the prosecutor describe Rex's accomplishments. Her mother noticed the child's intense attention and frowned with concern, but Emma was too focused on the magnificent dog at the front of the courtroom to notice her mother's worry. Williams continued her opening statement, detailing the evidence that Rex had helped gather: the defendant's scent on the money bags, trace DNA found on clothing in the warehouse, security footage that showed Rodriguez entering and leaving the building at times that correlated perfectly with Rex's tracking timeline. But the defense will try to convince you that a dog's nose is unreliable, Williams said, her voice taking on a harder edge. They will argue that Officer Rex is too old, too injured, too confused to provide accurate testimony. They will suggest that we are asking you to convict a man based on the word of an animal. False testimony, never led investigators astray, never failed to perform his duties with honor and distinction. Defense attorney Robert Hayes objected. Your Honor, the prosecution is anthropomorphizing the animal. Dogs don't give testimony. They exhibit behaviors that humans interpret. Sustained, Judge Hartwell ruled, but Williams had made her point. As Williams returned to her seat, Hayes rose with the predatory grace of a shark, scenting blood in the water. He was older than Williams, more experienced, and his reputation for destroying prosecution cases was legendary in legal circles. Members of the jury, Hayes began, his voice carrying the warm, folksy charm that had convinced countless juries to acquit his clients. I want to tell you a story about a dog named Rascal." Mike felt his stomach tighten. This was it, the attack he had been dreading. Rascal was a beautiful German shepherd, much like the animal you see before you today. Rascal had been trained by the finest handlers, had years of experience, and had what everyone believed was an infallible nose for detecting drugs. Based on Rascal's testimony, dozens of people were arrested, prosecuted, and convicted. Hayes paused dramatically. Later investigation revealed that Rascal had been wrong in over 60% of his cases. Innocent people went to prison because juries believed that a dog's nose was more reliable than human judgment. The courtroom was dead silent. Mike felt Rex tense beside him, as if the dog could sense the hostility being directed at him. Now, I'm not saying that Officer Rex is as unreliable as Rascal, Hayes continued smoothly, but I am asking you to consider the possibility that we are asking you to convict a man based on evidence that would not be admissible if it came from any other source. Hayes gestured toward Rex with what appeared to be genuine sympathy. Look at this animal, 8 years old. Hip injury severe enough to force his retirement. Obvious signs of stress and confusion in this unfamiliar environment. Are we really going to send a man to prison for life based on the word of a confused, aging dog who may be desperately trying to please his handler? In the gallery, Emma Morrison's face flushed with indignation. Her small hands clenched into fists, and Mike could see her whispering urgently to her mother, who was trying unsuccessfully to keep her daughter calm. Rodriguez, meanwhile, watched the proceedings with the detached interest of a man watching a particularly engaging movie. He showed no sign of guilt, no hint of concern. Only the cold confidence of someone who believed he had already won. Standing hesitantly at the edge of their row. "I'm sorry to bother you, but my daughter, she wanted me to tell your dog that he's beautiful." Mike smiled, grateful for any show of support. "Would she like to pet him? He's very gentle." Jennifer Morrison's face went pale. "Oh, no. No, that wouldn't be. We should just go. Emma, come on." But Emma Morrison had stood up, her stuffed police dog clutched in her arms, and was staring at Rex with an expression that made Mike's heart skip a beat. There was recognition in those dark eyes, not the simple recognition of seeing a dog like her toy, but something deeper, more personal. "Emma," her mother said sharply, "we need to go, now." As they hurried from the courtroom, Emma looked back over her shoulder at Rex, who watched her retreat with obvious interest. Something passed between them in that moment, a connection that neither Mike nor Rex fully understood, but that would soon change everything. "Strange kid," Williams commented, but Mike was too busy studying Rex's reaction to respond. The German shepherd was still staring at the doorway where Emma had disappeared, his head tilted in that way that meant he was processing something important. His tail gave a single, uncertain wag, not the professional acknowledgement he showed to other strangers, but something more personal, more confused. "What is it, boy?" Mike asked quietly. "What are you trying to remember?" But Rex had no words to answer, only the growing certainty that the little girl with the dark eyes and the toy police dog was somehow important, that their meeting was not the random encounter it appeared to be, but the first thread in a tapestry of truth that was about to unravel in ways none of them could imagine. As court prepared to resume, Marcus Rodriguez caught Mike's eye one final time. The criminal's smile was cold and confident. But there was something else there now, a flicker of uncertainty as he glanced toward the door where Emma Morrison had disappeared. For the first time since his arrest, Tank Rodriguez looked like a man who was beginning to suspect that his perfect crime might not have been so perfect after all. The silence in courtroom 4A was so complete that you could hear the soft tick of the wall clock as bailiff Tom Jackson approached the witness stand with a look of uncertainty etched across his weathered face. In 37 years of courthouse service, he had seen everything: murderers, drug dealers, corrupt politicians. But he had never been asked to swear in a German shepherd. "Your Honor," Jackson said hesitantly, his voice barely above a whisper, "I'm not sure of the chair," carpeted and raised to the perfect height for Rex's comfort, while ensuring the jury had a clear view. The modification had been the subject of heated pre-trial motions, with Hayes arguing it was theatrical manipulation designed to prejudice the jury. Williams had countered that denying Rex proper accommodation would be discriminatory. Now, as Mike guided Rex up the 3 wooden steps to the platform, the German shepherd's dignity was unmistakable. Despite his age, despite the slight hesitation from his injured hip, Rex carried himself with the bearing of a professional who understood the gravity of the moment. His ears were forward, alert, and his dark eyes swept the courtroom with the calm assessment of a veteran officer. "Raise your right hand," Bailiff Jackson began, then paused, looking helplessly at Judge Hartwell. "Place your hand on Officer Rex's head, Officer Chen," the judge instructed with barely concealed impatience. "The oath applies to both handler and K9 as a working unit." Mike's voice was steady but emotional as he recited the familiar words. "Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" "I do," Mike replied, his hand resting protectively on Rex's head. Rex, as if understanding the solemnity of the moment, sat perfectly still, his gaze fixed on the jury box. The jury, 8 women and 4 men, ranging in age from 23 to 67, watched with obvious fascination. Juror number 3, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, had to wipe away a tear. Juror number 7, a stern-faced man in his 50s, leaned forward with the intensity of someone witnessing history. Prosecutor Sarah Williams approached the witness stand with measured steps, her legal pad filled with questions that had been rehearsed dozens of times. But as she looked at Rex, this magnificent animal who had dedicated his life to protecting others, she felt the familiar surge of protectiveness that made her such a formidable advocate. "Officer Chen, would you please tell the court about your partnership with K9 Officer Rex?" Mike's hand never left Rex's head as he began to speak. "Rex and I have been partners for 6 years, Your Honor. He was assigned to me when he was 2 years old, fresh out of the K9 Academy, where he trained for 18 months in scent detection, suspect apprehension, and search and rescue operations." "What is Officer Rex's success rate in tracking suspects?" Williams asked. 94%, ma'am. In 6 years of active duty, Rex has successfully tracked and located 247 suspects. He has never given a false positive indication, and his testimony has been instrumental in her stuffed police dog so tightly that her knuckles were white. "Can you describe Officer Rex's training in scent detection?" Williams continued. Mike's voice grew stronger, more confident, as he entered familiar territory. Rex can distinguish between individual human scents, even in crowded environments. His nose contains over 300 million scent receptors, compared to a human's 6 million. He can detect scent particles that are days old, track through multiple weather conditions, and differentiate between similar scents with 99.7% accuracy. And on October 12th, the day of the First National Bank robbery, what did Officer Rex do? The courtroom held its collective breath as Mike recounted that crucial afternoon. We arrived at the scene at 11:23 a.m. While other investigators were interviewing witnesses and processing physical evidence, I gave Rex the command to search for the perpetrator's scent trail. Mike's eyes grew distant as he relived the memory. Rex immediately picked up something in the employee parking lot. His behavior changed. Ears forward, nose to the ground. That focused intensity he gets when he's locked on to a hot trail. Williams nodded encouragingly. What happened next? Rex led me east on Commerce Street, then north on Fifth Avenue. We crossed through Meridian Park, where he had to work around dozens of competing scents, joggers, dog walkers, food vendors, but he never lost focus. 3 miles and 47 minutes later, he led me directly to the warehouse on Industrial Boulevard, where we found the stolen money. "Objection," Hayes called out, half rising from his seat. "Foundation. How does Officer Chen know the dog was actually following the defendant's specific scent?" "I'll allow the witness to continue," Judge Hartwell ruled. "But establish your foundation, Counselor Williams." Williams reached for the evidence table, retrieving a clear plastic bag containing a black T-shirt. "Officer Chen, I'm showing you what's been marked as People's Exhibit 47. Can you identify this item?" Mike studied the bag carefully. "That's a T-shirt found in the defendant's cell during a routine search 3 days after his arrest. With the court's permission, I'd like Officer Rex to examine this evidence." Hayes was on his feet immediately. "Objection, this is pure theater, Your Honor. The prosecution wants to turn this courtroom into a circus act." "Overruled, Judge."
Of tons of ash and gases into the atmosphere, those people were no longer in harm's way. The eruption itself was devastating. But the human toll was far smaller than it could have been. Science didn't stop the volcano, but it heard it speak and helped others to listen. The tools used to monitor volcanoes are diverse. Seismometers, delicate instruments often buried deep into the ground, record every shake, every pulse. Tilt meters, placed along slopes, measure tiny changes in angle, shifts that might mean a chamber below is swelling. Satellites orbiting far above scan for changes invisible from the ground, the growth of domes, the emergence of cracks, the warming of rock. But these instruments alone are not enough. It is the interpretation, the careful, steady comparison of data over time that turns numbers into stories. Like reading a slow-moving novel, volcanologists piece together clues across years. Some volcanoes are chatterboxes, always rumbling and steaming. Others are quiet for centuries before making a sound. Learning which signals matter and which are just part of the volcano's regular rhythms takes time, experience, and humility. Volcanoes are not clocks. They do not erupt on a schedule, and they do not always follow the same patterns twice. Some give days or weeks of warning. Others erupt with very little notice, but most speak before they act, and if we listen carefully, we can often understand their language. Think of a volcano as a sleeper turning in bed. You can tell when the dream begins to change. You can hear the shift in breath, the murmur, the restless motion. The mountain doesn't always wake, but when it does, it's rarely without a whisper. This kind of listening is quiet work. It doesn't make headlines unless something goes wrong, but it is among the most hopeful of human pursuits. Not because it gives us control, but because it allows for coexistence. We cannot silence volcanoes, but we can share space with them if we learn how to hear. So tonight, as you drift into your own rest, imagine the tools gently watching a distant mountain. Imagine the soft hum of a seismometer deep underground, the patient blinking of a satellite far above. Imagine a scientist checking the data, not with urgency but with reverence. Listening, waiting, learning the rhythm of stone. In our next session, we'll step even deeper into this quiet symphony to explore the soundless thunder that volcanoes produce, the hidden music of magma rising, and how Earth sings in frequencies we are just beginning to hear. Most people think of volcanoes as things that speak through explosions. They picture fire leaping skyward, rocks hurled into the air, the boom echoing across valleys. But before the fire, before the ash and the roar, volcanoes often speak in ways we cannot hear, or at least not in the way we usually understand sound. Some of their loudest voices never pass through our ears.
Flicked toward Hayes, then back to Mike, seeking reassurance from the one constant in his increasingly confusing world. The real fight was about to begin. Robert Hayes moved around the courtroom like a maestro conducting a symphony of doubt, each gesture calculated to plant seeds of uncertainty in the jurors' minds. His silver hair gleamed under the fluorescent lights as he began his methodical dismantling of Rex's credibility. His voice carrying the smooth authority of a man who had made a career of making the impossible seem reasonable. "Members of the jury," Hayes began, positioning himself directly between Rex and the jury box. "I want you to consider something that the prosecution hopes you won't think about too carefully. We are being asked to convict a human being, to potentially send him to prison for the rest of his life, based on the word of an animal." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the courtroom like a heavy blanket. Not just any animal, but an 8-year-old German shepherd who has been retired from active duty due to physical limitations, who is in an unfamiliar and stressful environment, and who cannot be cross-examined about his conclusions. Mike felt Rex tense beside him, the dog's instincts telling him that the silver-haired man represented a threat, even if he couldn't understand the nature of that threat. Rex's ears swiveled between Hayes and Mike, seeking guidance in a situation that defied his training and experience. "Your Honor," Hayes continued, "I'd like to cite the case of State versus Morrison, where the Michigan Supreme Court ruled that canine scent evidence was inadmissible due to the lack of scientific standards governing police dog training and certification." Williams was on her feet immediately. "Objection! That case was overturned by federal precedent in—" "Sustained," Judge Hartwell interrupted. "Mr. Hayes, please confine yourself to established law in this jurisdiction." But Hayes was unfazed. He had achieved his purpose, planting the suggestion that other courts had found dog testimony unreliable. "Of course, Your Honor. Let me instead direct the court's attention to the documented phenomenon known in legal circles as cute dog syndrome." Several jurors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Juror number 3, the middle-aged woman who had earlier wiped away tears while watching Rex, now looked troubled and uncertain. "Studies have shown," Hayes continued, producing a thick legal brief from his table, that juries are significantly more likely to convict defendants when prosecution cases include testimony from animals, particularly dogs. The emotional response to a cute or heroic animal overrides rational consideration of the evidence. Emma Morrison, sitting in the gallery with her mother, felt her cheeks flush with indignation. Her small hands clenched into fists as she listened to the law. Placed a warning hand on Emma's arm, but the 8-year-old was beyond calming. Furthermore, Hayes said, warming to his theme, the prosecution has failed to establish the scientific reliability of canine scent detection. How do we know that this particular dog correctly identified my client's scent? How do we know he wasn't simply responding to his handler's unconscious cues? How do we know that an injured, aging animal under stress can perform with the same accuracy he might have shown in his prime? Mike's hand tightened protectively on Rex's head, feeling the dog's confusion growing with each hostile word. Rex had spent 6 years being praised and rewarded for his abilities. This courtroom full of strangers questioning his competence was as bewildering as it was hurtful. "Officer Chen," Hayes said, pivoting toward the witness stand with predatory grace, "you testified that Rex has a 94% success rate. That means he's wrong 6% of the time, correct? That's an outstanding record for any. Please just answer the question. 6% of the time Rex is wrong?" Mike's jaw clenched. "Yes, but—" "And in those cases where Rex was wrong, innocent people were arrested, weren't they? Had their lives disrupted, their reputations damaged, their freedom temporarily taken away." Williams objected. "Relevance, Your Honor? I'll allow it," Judge Hartwell ruled. "The witness may answer." "In the very few cases where Rex's initial alert didn't lead to a conviction," Mike replied carefully, "further investigation revealed that the individuals in question had legitimate reasons for having been in contact with the scents Rex detected." Hayes smiled coldly. "So Rex's nose doesn't lie. It's just that the people he identifies always have perfectly innocent explanations for why they smell like criminals." The sarcasm in Hayes's voice was like a physical blow. Rex's ears flattened slightly and he pressed closer to Mike's leg, seeking comfort from his handler. "Rex has never given a false positive," Mike insisted, his voice rising despite his efforts to remain calm. "How would you know?" Hayes shot back. "Dogs can't testify about their thought processes. They can't explain why they made a particular choice. They can't be cross-examined about their conclusions. We simply have to take your word for it that Rex was tracking the right scent, that he wasn't distracted or confused, that his age and injuries didn't affect his judgment." In the gallery, the tension was becoming unbearable. Some spectators nodded along with Hayes' arguments, while others looked increasingly uncomfortable with his attack on the police dog. Emma Morrison was practically vibrating with fury. Her mother's restraining hand the only thing keeping her seated. Hayes moved in for what he clearly hoped would be the killing blow. "Officer Chen, isn't it true that Rex was scheduled for retirement?"
Judy. Mike's face went pale. Rex's retirement was scheduled due to a hip injury that affects his mobility, his stamina, his ability to track effectively over long distances. Rex tracked for 3 miles on the day of the robbery without any 3 miles that left him exhausted and limping, according to the incident report filed by your supervising sergeant. Williams was objecting furiously, but Hayes had made his point. The jury now saw Rex not as a heroic police dog, but as an aging, injured animal whose testimony might be unreliable. But it was Rex's reaction that truly broke Mike's heart. The German shepherd was looking up at him with eyes full of confusion and hurt, unable to understand why these strangers were saying such terrible things about him, why his handler wasn't defending him more forcefully, why the praise and admiration of the morning had turned into criticism and doubt. Hayes sensed victory and pressed his advantage.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not asking you to hate this animal. He's clearly been a faithful servant, and I'm sure he's done good work in his career. But we cannot allow sentiment to override justice. We cannot convict a man based on evidence that would be inadmissible if it came from any other source. The courtroom was divided now, whispered conversations breaking out in the gallery as people took sides. Some of the jurors were nodding along with Hayes's arguments, while others looked troubled by his attack on Rex. Judge Hartwell finally called for order. "Mr. Hayes, do you have any further questions for this witness?" "Just one, Your Honor." Hayes turned back to Mike with an expression of feigned sympathy. "Officer Chen, given Rex's age, his injuries, and the stress of retirement, is it possible, just possible, that he might have made a mistake in this case?" The question hung in the air like poison. Mike looked down at Rex, who was still gazing up at him with absolute trust and loyalty, and felt his heart break a little more. "Rex has never let me down," Mike said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "That wasn't my question," Hayes pressed. "Is it possible that he might have made a mistake?" The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Mike knew that any admission of fallibility would destroy Rex's testimony. But he also knew that claiming perfection would sound unbelievable. "Anything is possible," Mike finally admitted, his voice barely audible. Hayes smiled triumphantly. No further questions. The afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows of courtroom 4A, casting long shadows across the polished floor as Judge Patricia Hartwell prepared to render the decision that would determine not just the fate of Rex's testimony, but potentially the outcome of the entire case. The packed gallery held its collective breath, the silence so complete that the soft whir of the air conditioning system sounded unnaturally loud. Rex sat motionless on his platform, his dark eyes moving between Mike and the silver-haired lawyer who had spent the last hour systematically dismantling his reputation. The German shepherd's confusion was palpable. His ears twitched at every sound, his head tilted in the way that meant he was trying to process information that didn't fit his understanding of the world. Judge Hartwell removed her reading glasses and set them carefully on the bench before her, a gesture that courthouse regulars recognized as a precursor to a significant ruling. Her gray eyes swept the courtroom, taking in the tense faces of the attorneys, the expectant jurors, the packed gallery where spectators leaned forward in anticipation. "This court has considered the defense's motion to exclude the testimony of Canine Officer Rex," she began, her voice carrying the weight of 30 years of judicial experience. "While I have the utmost respect for Officer Rex's distinguished service record and the dedication of his handler, Officer Chen, the defense has raised some valid concerns about the reliability and appropriateness of canine testimony in this case." Mike felt the words hit him like physical blows. Rex, sensing his handler's distress, pressed closer against his leg, offering comfort even as his own world crumbled around him. In the gallery, Emma Morrison half rose from her seat, her mouth opening in protest before her mother's firm hand pulled her back down. "Shh, Emma," Jennifer whispered urgently. "You have to be quiet." "The court notes," Judge Hartwell continued, "that Officer Rex is 8 years old and has been retired from active duty due to physical limitations. While this does not necessarily impair his scent detection abilities, it does raise questions about his performance under stress in unfamiliar environments." Prosecutor Sarah Williams gripped her pen so tightly that her knuckles had gone white. She had known this was a possibility, but knowing and experiencing were two very different things. Without Rex's testimony, her case against Rodriguez would be severely weakened, possibly fatally so. "Furthermore," the judge said, her voice softening slightly as if she regretted the words she was about to speak, "the court must consider the potential for prejudicial impact on the jury. The emotional response to a police dog, however professional and well-trained, may indeed override rational consideration of other evidence." Marcus Rodriguez, who had maintained his facade of bored indifference throughout most of the proceedings, now allowed himself a small, cold smile. His attorney, Robert Hayes, remained perfectly composed, but there was a glitter of triumph in his eyes that spoke of a battle well fought and won. Therefore, Judge Hartwell announced, her words falling like stones into still water. This court finds that while Canine Officer Rex's testimony might be probative, its potential for prejudicial impact outweighs its probative value. The motion to exclude is granted. The courtroom erupted. Gasps of shock and disappointment rippled through the gallery, while Rodriguez's supporters, a small but vocal group of family members, exchanged satisfied smiles. Several jurors looked genuinely distressed by the ruling, particularly the middle-aged woman who had wiped away tears during Rex's initial testimony. "Your Honor," Williams said, rising desperately from her seat, "the prosecution respectfully requests—" "Counselor," Judge Hartwell interrupted firmly, "my ruling stands. Bailiff Jackson, please escort Officer Rex from the courtroom." Tom Jackson approached the witness platform with obvious reluctance, his weathered face reflecting the same pain that Mike was feeling. In 37 years of courthouse service, this was perhaps the most difficult task he had ever been asked to perform. "Come on, son," Jackson said gently to Mike, his voice thick with sympathy. "Court's orders." Mike felt as if he were moving through thick fog as he stood and clipped Rex's lead to his collar. The German shepherd looked up at him with questioning eyes, clearly sensing that something terrible was happening, but unable to understand what or why. "It's okay, boy," Mike whispered, though the words tasted like lies. "We did our best." As they descended from the witness platform, Rex's nails clicking against the wooden steps, Mike became aware of the eyes following their progress. Some faces in the gallery showed sympathy and support. Others reflected the satisfaction of those who had opposed Rex's testimony from the beginning. But it was Emma Morrison who broke Mike's heart completely. The 8-year-old was standing now, despite her mother's attempts to keep her seated, tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched her hero being led away in apparent disgrace. Her small hands clutched her stuffed police dog so tightly that the toy's seams were straining, and her brown eyes blazed with an indignation that seemed far too mature for her young face. "This isn't right," Emma whispered, her voice carrying in the unnatural quiet that had fallen over the courtroom. "He's a good dog. He's a hero." Jennifer Morrison's face flushed with embarrassment as she tried to quiet her daughter. "Emma, please, sit down. This isn't our business." But Emma was beyond listening to her mother's warnings. As Rex passed her row, the little girl stepped into the aisle, blocking their path. Mike stopped, looking down at this small, fierce child who seemed determined to defend Rex when no one else would. Rex's reaction was immediate and startling. The moment his eyes met Emma's, his entire demeanor changed. His ears perked forward, his tail began a hesitant wag, and he took a step toward the little girl with something approaching recognition dawning in his dark eyes. "I know you," Emma said softly, her voice carrying a certainty that made Mike's breath catch in his throat. "You saved me." The courtroom had gone completely.
Strange justice didn't end there. In some cases, a scented offender might be given what was called a fragrance exile. Not a real exile. She wouldn't be sent away from Rome, but she would be forbidden from using any perfume, oil, or bath scent for 30 days. It was a symbolic stripping of luxury, a quiet shadow of shame. And in the heat of Roman summer, with its dust and sweat and smoke, that silence of scent could feel louder than any public scolding. Of course, men were not exempt. A young senator who wore too much foreign musk to impress at a banquet could also be sentenced. His punishment? A bath in sour goat milk followed by a march past the Senate House. One poet described the scent as a warning to the nose as much as to the heart. It was, once again, Rome's curious way of turning something elegant into something corrective. And yet, When the sentence was complete, when the skin was washed clean in the river, and the last traces of garlic oil faded from the robes, the offender was considered restored. They had walked the path of scent. They had paid their aromatic dues. Now, as the stars turn above the eternal city, and the night breeze moves softly through the fig trees, you can almost catch a hint of those strange oils on the air. Sharp, bitter, forgotten. Like a whisper from the past, sleep deeper now. Let the scent of history drift quietly from your thoughts. The night is far from over, and stranger punishments still lie ahead. As the scent of strange oils fades from the Roman wind, and the night grows softer still, we move to another corner of Rome's curious justice, one that focused not on the body's pain, nor its scent, but its symbol, hair. In ancient Rome, hair was more than vanity. It was a language of status, of virtue, of control. A senator's clipped curls, a matron's carefully coiled braids, a slave's cropped crown. Even the simplest cut held meaning. And so, when someone stepped outside their role, their rank, or their place in society, it was not uncommon for punishment to come in the form of a blade, not a sword, but a pair of shears. There existed a little-known class of officials called the tonsores judiciari, the judgment barbers. These were not your everyday hairdressers. They were servants of the court, summoned only for special penalties. When a Roman citizen was judged to have disgraced their role by lying about their station, impersonating a magistrate, or violating laws of modesty, the court would summon the judgment shears. The accused would be brought to a small stage in a public square. There, with quiet ceremony, the tonsor would begin to cut. Not all the hair, but just enough. A noblewoman's braids undone, a merchant's beard unevenly shorn, a soldier's proud top knot reduced to tufts. Always just enough to be noticed, always deliberately unattractive. And then they were sent back into the city, marked not by chains or stamps, but by awkward angles and jagged.
Mid-sentence. Rustling papers fell silent. Even the soft whir of the air conditioning seemed to pause in deference to the power of those 3 small words, spoken by an 8-year-old girl, whose voice trembled not with fear, but with fierce determination. Every head in courtroom 4A turned as one toward Emma Morrison, who stood in the center aisle like a tiny warrior prepared to battle giants. Her dark hair had come loose from its ponytail during her emotional reaction to Rex's dismissal, framing a face that blazed with righteous indignation. In her small hands, she still clutched the stuffed police dog, a plush replica that paled in comparison to the magnificent German shepherd who was slowly turning toward her voice with growing recognition. "Emma, no!" Jennifer Morrison's voice cracked with panic as she lunged from her seat, reaching desperately for her daughter's arm. "Sit down this instant. You can't. We're not supposed to." But Emma Morrison had spent 2 years waiting for this moment, even though she hadn't known it was coming. 2 years of nightmares about smoke and flames. 2 years of clutching her stuffed police dog while thunder crashed outside her bedroom window. 2 years of telling anyone who would listen about the brave dog who had carried her to safety when the world was burning around her. "Emma, please," Jennifer whispered, her voice breaking with a mixture of embarrassment and terror. She could feel hundreds of eyes boring into them, could sense the weight of history pressing down on this moment that she didn't understand, but somehow knew would change everything. "We have to go. Right now." Judge Hartwell's gavel remained motionless in her raised hand as she stared at the little girl in the aisle. In 30 years on the bench,
Patricia Hartwell had developed an almost supernatural ability to read people, to distinguish between truth and deception, between genuine emotion and calculated performance. What she saw in Emma Morrison's face was the unmistakable stamp of absolute truth, the kind of certainty that couldn't be coached or manufactured. "Young lady," Judge Hartwell said softly, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent courtroom. "What did you just say?" Emma's chin lifted defiantly, her brown eyes blazing with the same fire that had sustained her through that terrifying night 2 years ago. "I said, he saved me. That dog, Officer Rex, he's the one who found me when I was trapped. He's the reason I'm alive." Rex's entire body had gone rigid with attention. His ears pricked so far forward they seemed ready to lift him off the ground. His dark eyes were locked on Emma's face with laser-like intensity, and Mike Chen could feel the subtle trembling that ran through his partner's frame. Not fear or confusion now, but recognition, dawning like sunrise after the longest night. She's just a child and spent 2 years trying to avoid. She doesn't understand what she's saying. She gets confused sometimes, mixes up reality and, "Mama, stop!" Emma's voice cut through her mother's protests with startling authority. For a moment, the 8-year-old sounded far older than her years, carrying the weight of someone who had looked death in the face and survived to tell about it. "I know what I'm saying. I know what happened, and I know him." Mike Chen stood frozen beside Rex, still holding the lead that was supposed to escort his partner from the courtroom in defeat. His mind raced frantically, trying to process what he was hearing, trying to make connections that danced just beyond his grasp. There was something familiar about the child, something that tugged at memories filed away in the routine of daily police work. The gallery had erupted into a symphony of whispered conversations as spectators leaned forward in their seats, straining to catch every word of the extraordinary drama unfolding before them. Some pulled out cell phones, trying to capture the moment that was clearly destined to become courthouse legend. Others sat in stunned silence, sensing that they were witnessing something profound and unrepeatable. But it was the reaction of Marcus "Tank" Rodriguez that truly told the story of what was happening. The man who had maintained his facade of bored indifference throughout the morning's proceedings was now leaning forward in his chair, his massive hands gripping the defendant's table so tightly that his knuckles had gone white. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the courtroom's carefully controlled temperature, and his dark eyes darted frantically between Emma and his attorney. "This is highly irregular," defense attorney Robert Hayes said, his smooth courtroom voice now carrying an edge of desperation that hadn't been there moments before. "Your Honor, this child is clearly disturbed. She's disrupting official court proceedings with fantasies and—" "Mr. Hayes," Judge Hartwell's voice carried the kind of quiet authority that had silenced more formidable opponents than a desperate defense attorney. "Sit down." Hayes opened his mouth to object, then seemed to think better of it. He sank into his chair, but his pale eyes never left Emma's small figure in the aisle. Rex took a tentative step forward, his movement constrained by the lead in Mike's hand, but his intention clear. He wanted to reach the little girl whose voice had triggered something deep in his canine memory, something important, something that had been buried under months of retirement and uncertainty. "Rex?" Mike whispered, looking down at his partner with growing amazement. "Do you know her?" The German shepherd's response was immediate and unmistakable. His tail, which had remained tucked and subdued throughout his humiliating dismissal from the witness stand, began to wag with increasing enthusiasm. Not the measured professional acknowledgement he showed to strangers, but the joyful recognition of reuniting with someone precious. Emma took another step forward, her small hands reaching toward Rex, with complete trust and zero fear. "You remember me, don't you, boy? You remember that night?
when everything was dark and scary, and you came to get me? The courtroom held its collective breath, as child and dog stared at each other across the formal space that separated them. In that moment, all the legal procedures and courtroom protocols seemed to melt away, leaving only the pure truth of connection between a little girl who had been saved and the hero who had saved her. Rodriguez's attorney was whispering urgently in his client's ear, but the massive defendant seemed beyond hearing. His face had gone ashen, and his breathing was becoming increasingly labored as he stared at Emma Morrison with the expression of a man watching his carefully constructed world crumble in real time. "Your Honor," Prosecutor Sarah Williams said, rising from her seat with the careful movements of someone who sensed opportunity but didn't want to spook it. "Perhaps we should hear what this young lady has to say." Judge Hartwell nodded slowly, her experienced eyes taking in every detail of the scene before her. The little girl's unwavering certainty, the dog's obvious recognition, the defendant's growing panic, and the mother's desperate attempts to control a situation that had already spiraled far beyond her influence. "Miss Morrison," Judge Hartwell said gently, "would you like to tell us about the night Officer Rex saved your life?" Emma's response was immediate and unwavering. "Yes, ma'am. I've been waiting 2 years to tell someone who would believe me." Emma Morrison moved toward the front of the courtroom with the deliberate pace of a child who had spent 2 years rehearsing this moment in her dreams, without knowing it would ever come to pass. Each step carried her further from her mother's frantic attempts to call her back and closer to the German shepherd, whose dark eyes tracked her movement with increasing intensity. Bailiff Tom Jackson found himself caught in an impossible situation. His 37 years of courthouse experience providing no guidance for how to handle an 8-year-old girl who was walking toward the witness area with the determination of someone on a sacred mission. His hand moved instinctively toward his radio, then hesitated as he caught Judge Hartwell's subtle shake of the head. "Let her come," the judge said quietly, her voice carrying only to Jackson's ears. "Something important is happening here." Emma's small sneakers squeaked. "That's the dog who found me in the fire," Emma announced, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the silent courtroom. The simple declaration hit the assembled crowd like a physical blow, gasps of surprise and murmurs of amazement rippling through the gallery like stones thrown into still water. Rex's memory banks suddenly blazed to life with images that had been filed away in the routine of daily police work. Smoke-filled corridors, the acrid smell of burning wood and plastic, the desperate search through a house where every room might contain a victim or might hide a death trap. And then, the moment that had made it all worthwhile, finding a small figure huddled under a bed in an upstairs bedroom, unconscious from smoke inhalation, but still breathing, still savable. The German shepherd's entire body began to tremble with excitement as the memories crashed over him. His tail wagged so vigorously that his entire hindquarters shook, and he whined softly, not with distress, but with the joy of reunion with someone precious who had been thought lost forever. Mike Chen felt the world tilt on its axis as understanding finally dawned. "October 15th, he whispered, his voice thick with amazement. 2 years ago. The Morrison house on Maple Street. The little girl in the upstairs bedroom. the flashback hit him with startling clarity. Arriving at the scene to find firefighters battling a blaze that had already consumed most of the first floor, being told that a child was still trapped inside, giving Rex the command to find her, while other rescuers focused on containing the flames. Rex had disappeared into the smoke-filled house, with the fearless determination that defined his approach to every mission, and 23 minutes later had emerged guiding firefighters to Emma's location. "Oh my God," Jennifer Morrison breathed from her seat in the gallery, her hands covering her mouth, as tears began to stream down her cheeks. "Oh my God, it really is him." The courtroom was transforming before everyone's eyes, from a formal legal proceeding into something far more profound, a reunion between a hero and the life he had saved, a moment of pure truth that cut through all the legal maneuvering and courtroom strategy to reveal the beating heart of what justice really meant. Emma reached Rex's side and immediately sank to her knees, wrapping her small arms around the German shepherd's neck in a hug that spoke of 2 years' worth of gratitude and love. Rex accepted the embrace with the gentle dignity that had always defined his interactions with children, his tail wagging so hard that it created a soft drumbeat against the floor. "I told everyone about you," Emma whispered into Rex's fur, her voice thick with tears of joy. "I told them about the brave police dog who came into the smoke to find me." She watched the extraordinary scene unfold. In 3 decades on the bench, she had witnessed countless emotional moments, but nothing had prepared her for the pure, unfiltered truth of this reunion between child and protector. "Your Honor," defense attorney Hayes said, his voice carrying a desperate edge as he half rose from his seat, "this is clearly a setup. Some kind of emotional manipulation designed to—" "Mr. Hayes," Judge Hartwell's voice cut through his objection like a blade. "If you interrupt this moment again, I will hold you in contempt of court. Sit down and be quiet." Hayes sank back into his chair, but his pale eyes were filled with the knowledge that his carefully constructed defense was crumbling in real time. Beside him, Marcus Rodriguez was breathing heavily, his massive frame shaking as he stared at Emma Morrison with unconcealed terror. Rex pulled back from Emma's embrace, just far enough to look into her face, his dark eyes shining with intelligence and recognition. The German shepherd had always possessed an almost supernatural ability to read human emotions, and what he saw in Emma's tear-streaked face was the same courage and determination that had sustained her through that terrible night 2 years ago. "You remember, don't you?" Emma said softly, reaching up to stroke Rex's graying muzzle. "You remember how scared I was, how I couldn't breathe, how everything was so dark and hot. But then I heard you barking, and I knew someone was coming to help me." Mike Chen felt his own eyes filling with tears as he watched his partner's joyful reunion with the child whose life had defined the meaning of their work together. This was why they did what they did, not for commendations or recognition, but for moments like this, when the bond between protector and protected transcended all barriers and revealed the true nobility of service. "Emma," Jennifer Morrison called from the gallery, her voice breaking with emotion. "Emma, honey, is that really—" "It's him, Mama," Emma replied, without taking her eyes off Rex's face. "It's really him. He's gotten older, and his face is more gray, but it's him. He's my hero." The courtroom erupted in spontaneous applause as the full impact of the reunion became clear. Even some of the jurors were wiping away tears, their earlier skepticism about dog testimony replaced by something far more powerful, the undeniable evidence of love and loyalty that transcended species. But it was Judge Hartwell who restored order to the emotional chaos, her gavel finally finding its purpose as she called for quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen, please. Miss Morrison, would you be willing to tell us more about the night Officer Rex saved your life? Emma nodded solemnly, her small hand still resting on Rex's head, as if drawing strength from the connection. Yes, ma'am. I remember.
Changed her life forever. Still kneeling beside Rex, her small hand resting on the German shepherd's graying head, she spoke with the clarity that only truth can possess, each word carefully chosen, each detail preserved in the amber of traumatic memory. It was late, she began, her brown eyes distant, as she accessed memories that had haunted her dreams for 2 years. I was supposed to be asleep, but I couldn't, because there were strange sounds downstairs. Not normal house sounds, heavy footsteps, voices I didn't recognize, things being moved around in the basement. The courtroom was absolutely silent, every person straining to catch each word of the little girl's testimony. Judge Hartwell leaned forward in her chair, her judicial training warring with her human instinct to protect the child from having to relive such trauma. Then I smelled smoke, Emma continued, her voice steady, but her grip on Rex tightening slightly. At first, I thought maybe Daddy was making a fire in the fireplace, but it smelled wrong, like chemicals and burning plastic instead of wood, and it was getting stronger really fast. Rex's ears were pricked forward, his dark eyes fixed on Emma's face, as if he too was remembering that terrible night. Occasionally, his tail would give a gentle wag, offering comfort and encouragement as she spoke. I got scared and tried to go to my parents' room, but the hallway was full of smoke, and I couldn't see anything. I could hear crackling sounds from downstairs, and the smoke was getting thicker and thicker. Emma's voice wavered slightly, but she took a deep breath and continued. I went back to my room and hid under my bed because I didn't know what else to do. I was coughing really hard, and it was getting hard to breathe. Jennifer Morrison was openly weeping now, her hands pressed to her mouth as she listened to her daughter describe the nightmare that had nearly claimed her life. Other spectators in the gallery were equally affected, many wiping away tears as they imagined the terror of a 6-year-old child trapped in a burning house. I thought I was going to die, Emma said simply, her honesty cutting through the courtroom like a blade. Everything was getting dark, and I couldn't stop coughing, and I was so scared. But then, I heard barking, loud, strong barking that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Rex's tail began to wag more vigorously as Emma described his arrival at the scene, and Mike Chen felt his chest swell with pride at the memory of his partner's fearless courage that night. The barking was getting closer, and then I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs, not the scary footsteps from before, but good footsteps, helper footsteps. And then, this amazing dog came into my room. Emma turned to look directly at Rex, her eyes shining with gratitude and love. He wasn't scared of the smoke at all. Shepard pressed closer to Emma, as if remembering the desperation he had felt that night when time was running out and a little life hung in the balance. He stayed with me while the firefighters got me out, Emma continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. Even when there were loud crashing sounds and more smoke, he didn't leave me. He kept barking to make sure they knew exactly where I was, and then he followed us all the way outside to make sure I was safe. Prosecutor Sarah Williams felt her heart racing as she began to see the connections that Emma's innocent testimony was revealing. The fire at the Morrison house hadn't been random. It had occurred just 3 days after the bank robbery, and the child's description of strange sounds and unfamiliar voices in the basement painted a picture that was becoming increasingly clear. But it was Marcus Rodriguez's reaction that truly told the story. The massive defendant was now sweating profusely, his breathing labored as he whispered urgently to his attorney. His dark eyes darted frantically between Emma and the exit doors, like a trapped animal looking for escape routes. The firefighters said I was very lucky, Emma continued, oblivious to the drama her words were creating. They said if the dog hadn't found me when he did, the smoke would have,
She couldn't finish the sentence, but everyone in the courtroom understood what she couldn't say. And after that night, Emma said, turning back to Rex with a smile that lit up her entire face. Rex became my hero. My parents got me this stuffed dog that looks like him, and I carry it everywhere to remind me that there are good dogs in the world who save people. Judge Hartwell wiped away tears she hadn't realized she was crying. Emma, you said there were strange sounds in your house before the fire started. Can you tell us more about that? Emma nodded solemnly. There were people in our basement who weren't supposed to be there. I heard them moving heavy things around, and one of them had a really deep voice that scared me. They were there for a long time before the fire started. Defense attorney Hayes was on his feet immediately. Objection. The child is clearly speculating, drawing conclusions based on... Overruled, Judge Hartwell snapped. The witness is describing what she personally observed. Continue, Emma. I think they started the fire to hide what they were doing down there, Emma said with the straightforward logic that only children possess. Because after the fire department put out the flames, the police found burned money in our basement, money that didn't belong to us. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs as the full implication of Emma's words became clear. The Morrison house fire hadn't been an accident or even simple arson. It had been a deliberate attempt to destroy evidence of the bank robbery, with an innocent family caught in the crossfire. Rodriguez was openly panic-stricken now, his massive frame shaking as he realized that his perfect crime was unraveling because of the testimony of a child he had tried to kill 2 years ago. Your Honor, William said, rising from his seat with barely contained excitement, the prosecution would like to request an immediate recess to... Denied, Judge Hartwell ruled firmly. Emma, can you tell us anything else about that night? Any other details you remember? Emma's brow furrowed in concentration as she searched her memory. There was a man with a really scary voice who kept saying bad words. And right before I smelled the smoke, I heard someone say something about making sure there were no witnesses. The words hit the courtroom like a physical blow. Rodriguez's attorney was whispering frantically in his client's ear, but the massive defendant seemed beyond hearing, lost in the nightmare of his past catching up with him. Rex, sensing the tension in the room but focused entirely on Emma, pressed his muzzle against her cheek in a gesture of pure affection. The little girl giggled despite the gravity of the moment, wrapping her arms around the German shepherd's neck one more time. I love you too, Officer Rex. She whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for being the best police dog in the whole world. Judge Hartwell realized that she was witnessing something extraordinary, not just a reunion between a child and her rescuer, but the unraveling of a conspiracy that went far deeper than anyone had imagined. Emma's innocent testimony had revealed that the Morrison house fire wasn't random arson, but a deliberate attempt to destroy evidence of the bank robbery. Ladies and gentlemen, Judge Hartwell announced, her voice carrying the weight of judicial authority, in light of these new revelations, this court will recess for 1 hour while the prosecution prepares additional evidence. Bailiff Jackson, please ensure that Miss Morrison and her family are provided with appropriate protection. As the courtroom began to empty, Emma remained kneeling beside Rex, her small hand stroking his graying fur, while she whispered words of love and gratitude that only he could hear. The German shepherd's tail wagged continuously, his dark eyes shining with the joy of reunion and the satisfaction of a job well done. Marcus Tank Rodriguez was led away in shackles, his perfect crime destroyed by 3 simple words from a little girl who had survived his attempt to eliminate the only witness to his conspiracy. He saved me, Emma had said, and in doing so, she had saved them all. The Morrison house on Maple Street looked like something out of a Norman Rockwell painting. White picket fence, manicured lawn, leaves scattered like confetti. Inside, David and Jennifer Morrison slept deeply, their 6-year-old daughter Emma curled under a teddy bear in her small bedroom. The house hummed with the familiar sounds of a family at rest, but in the basement 3 men work under flashlight glow, stacking cash, sorting jewelry. Marcus Tank Rodriguez commanded the operation. $2.3 million from the First National Bank heist, hidden in a quiet home chosen for its normality. He'd studied the Morrisons' routines, confident no one would suspect. At 11:47 p.m., an overloaded circuit sparked, igniting cash near the water heater. Flames tore through the basement and into the house. The thieves fled with what they could carry. Upstairs, Emma woke to smoke and alarms. Calling for her parents, she crawled under her bed, clutching her bear. David and Jennifer, crawling toward her room, collapsed from smoke before reaching her. 8 miles away, Officer Mike Chen and his German Shepherd partner, Rex, heard the dispatch. Structure fire, possible victims trapped. At the scene, flames engulfed the first floor. Firefighters reported they couldn't reach upstairs. Rex caught a scent, rigid with focus. Ignoring protocol, Mike followed him inside. Heat and smoke blinded them, but Rex led straight to Emma's room, barking urgently. Mike kicked in the door, found Emma unconscious under the bed, and carried her out while Rex cleared their path. At the hospital, Emma's first words were, "Where is the brave dog who saved me?" Not a toy dog, she explained, the real one, with kind eyes. The fire marshal's report listed the cause as undetermined, missing the accelerants in the basement. No one connected the blaze to the bank robbery yet. 2 years later, in courtroom 4A, Emma sat beside Rex, now graying but still alert. Judge Hartwell asked about the night of the fire. Emma recalled deep, unfamiliar voices in the basement, heavy objects scraping and someone saying, "Make sure there are no witnesses." Rodriguez, at the defense table, began to sweat. Mike Chen's thoughts raced. October 12th, bank robbery. October 15th, fire. 3 days apart. Emma described seeing a huge man carrying heavy bags out the basement door and tossing a red container into the bushes. She remembered its strong gasoline smell. Prosecutor Sarah Williams's pulse quickened. Accelerant. Rex's ears pricked. He moved toward Rodriguez, sat in alert posture, the same he used to identify suspects. He remembered the scent. "Your Honor," Williams said, "Officer Rex is identifying the defendant as connected to the Morrison house fire." Overruled objections couldn't stop the silent accusation in Rex's unwavering stare. Emma added that after the man left, cars sped away, and some expected, followed by the same no witnesses threat. The dam broke. "They weren't supposed to be there," Rodriguez shouted. "The family was supposed to be gone. The kid saw me. I had to make sure she couldn't identify me." The courtroom erupted. Judge Hartwell's gavel cut the noise, but the confession stood. Williams moved to add charges: attempted murder, first-degree arson, conspiracy. Emma turned to Rex. "You didn't just save me from the fire. You saved me from the bad man." Rex's tail wagged once. Justice had come, delivered by a child's memory and a dog's nose that never forgot. Emma Morrison's small voice carried the weight of absolute truth as she continued her testimony, her dark eyes distant with the effort of retrieving memories that had been buried beneath 2 years of trauma and nightmares. Still kneeling beside Rex, her small hand resting on the German Shepherd's graying head, She spoke with the clarity that only comes from having witnessed something too important to forget, no matter how much it hurt to remember. "I saw inside the basement that night," Emma said, her voice growing stronger as she felt the courtroom's complete attention focused on her words. "When I looked out my window and saw the big man carrying the bags, the outside door to the basement was still open, and there were lights on down there that weren't supposed to be there." Judge Patricia Hartwell leaned forward in her chair, her experienced eyes recognizing the significance of what the child was about to reveal. In 30 years on the bench, she had learned to distinguish between the fantasies of traumatized children and the accurate memories of actual witnesses, and everything about Emma's demeanor spoke to genuine recall. "What did you see in the basement, Emma?" Prosecutor Sarah Williams asked gently, her voice carefully modulated to encourage the child without leading her testimony. Emma's brow furrowed in concentration as she accessed visual memories that had been dismissed by adults as the confused recollections of a frightened child. "There were tables down there that weren't ours, big folding tables like they use in the church basement for potluck dinners, and they were covered with stacks and stacks of money, all organized in neat piles like someone was counting it." The courtroom was absolutely silent, except for the soft scratch of court reporters' fingers flying across their keyboards. Every person in the gallery leaned forward, straining to catch every word of the extraordinary testimony that was unfolding before them. "There was a red toolbox, too," Emma continued, her voice taking on the matter-of-fact tone that children use when describing things adults find impossible to believe. "A big red one, like the kind Daddy uses for work, but it was open and full of different things, not tools, but papers and little bags and bottles with labels on them." Marcus Rodriguez's reaction was immediate and devastating. The massive defendant's face had gone completely ashen, and sweat was now flowing freely down his cheeks despite the courtroom's air conditioning. His hands shook visibly as he gripped the edge of the defendant's table, his knuckles white with the strain of trying to maintain some semblance of composure. Rex's posture had shifted subtly during Emma's testimony, his professional instincts taking over as he processed the significance of what the little girl was revealing. The German shepherd's ears were pricked forward with intense concentration, and his dark eyes alternated between Emma's face and Rodriguez's increasingly panicked reaction. "The chemical smells were really strong down there," Emma said, wrinkling her nose at the memory. "Not just the gasoline smell, but other things too, sharp smells that made my eyes water, even from upstairs. And there were papers everywhere, spread out on the tables like someone was working on a really big project." Williams felt her pulse quicken as she realized what Emma was describing. The Morrison basement hadn't just been used to store the proceeds from the bank robbery. It had been transformed into a complete money laundering operation, with chemicals for treating bills, paperwork for creating false documentation, and equipment for processing large amounts of currency. "Emma," Williams said carefully, "the papers you saw, do you remember what they looked like?" Some of them had numbers on them, like bank papers, and some had pictures of people's faces, like driver's licenses, but not quite the same. There were lots of them, more than I could count, all spread out like someone was trying to match them up with something else. Defense attorney Robert Hayes was visibly struggling with an ethical crisis that threatened to tear apart everything he believed about his profession. His client's guilt was becoming undeniable. But more than that, the scope of Rodriguez's criminal enterprise was far broader than anything Hayes had imagined when he agreed to take the case. "Your Honor," Hayes said, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining professional composure. "I need to request a brief consultation with my client regarding these new allegations." "Denied," Judge Hartwell replied firmly. "Your client will have ample opportunity to respond to these revelations. Emma, please continue." Emma's next words provided the most damaging testimony yet. "I heard the men talking about other houses too, other families they were watching. The scary voice said something about how they had been doing this for a long time, moving from house to house so nobody would figure out what they were doing." The implications hit the courtroom like a physical blow. This wasn't an isolated incident. Rodriguez and his crew had been systematically targeting innocent families, using their homes as temporary bases for a money laundering operation that spanned months or even years. Mike Chen stared at his partner with growing amazement as he realized the full scope of what Rex had accomplished during their investigation of the bank robbery. The German Shepherd hadn't just tracked a fleeing bank robber, he had uncovered the center of a criminal enterprise that had been operating under the radar for years. Rex was right, Mike whispered to himself, his voice filled with awe and pride. He knew there was something bigger here. His instincts were telling him that Rodriguez wasn't just a simple bank robber. Additional police officers began filing into the courtroom as word spread through the law enforcement community about what was happening in courtroom 4A. Detective Captain Maria Santos, head of the department's financial crimes unit, took a seat in the gallery, her notebook already filling with details that would require immediate investigation. "Emma," Williams continued, "you mentioned seeing the man with the scary voice. Can you describe him?" Emma turned to look directly at Rodriguez, her brown eyes showing no fear despite the massive defendant's intimidating presence. "He's right there," she said simply, pointing at Rodriguez with the absolute certainty that only truth can provide. "He's the one who said they couldn't leave any witnesses. He's the one who wanted to make sure our whole family died in the fire." Rodriguez's composure finally shattered completely. The massive defendant lunged forward in his chair, his face contorted with rage and desperation as he realized that his perfect crime had been witnessed and remembered by a child whose testimony was destroying his life. "She's lying," Rodriguez screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. "She's just a kid. She doesn't know what she's talking about." But even as he protested, Rodriguez's behavior was confirming every word of Emma's testimony. His panic, his detailed knowledge of what the child was describing, his desperate attempts to discredit her, all of it pointed to guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. Rex immediately moved into a protective stance between Emma and Rodriguez, his professional training taking over as he recognized the threat the defendant posed to the little girl. The German Shepherd's lips pulled back in a silent snarl, his body language making it clear that he would defend Emma against any danger. "Bailiff Johnson," Judge Hartwell commanded, her voice cutting through Rodriguez's hysterical protests, "restrain the defendant immediately and call for additional security in this courtroom." As Johnson and two additional bailiffs moved to control Rodriguez, Emma reached up to stroke Rex's fur, her small voice cutting through the chaos with words that would be remembered long after the trial ended. "It's okay, Officer Rex," she said softly, her voice carrying the courage that had sustained her through 2 years of nightmares. "The truth is finally coming out. You don't have to protect." Emma's reassurance, but his alert posture never wavered. The German Shepherd had spent his career protecting the innocent, and his instincts told him that his job wasn't finished yet. The basement revelation had opened a door that could never be closed again, exposing a criminal enterprise that had operated in the shadows for years, destroying families and communities while enriching those who saw human lives
as nothing more than obstacles to be eliminated. But Emma Morrison's courage, supported by Rex's unwavering loyalty and perfect memory, had finally brought the truth into the light, where it could no longer be hidden or denied. The revelation of Rodriguez's broader criminal enterprise sent shockwaves through the law enforcement community that extended far beyond the confines of courtroom 4A. As Emma's testimony continued, painting an increasingly detailed picture of the money laundering operation that had used her family's home as ground zero, investigators throughout the city began connecting cases that had seemed unrelated for years. Detective Captain Maria Santos sat in the gallery frantically making notes as Emma described the sophisticated operation she had witnessed in her basement. The Financial Crimes Unit had been investigating a series of suspicious house fires over the past 3 years, all involving middle-class families with no apparent connections to criminal activity. Now, with Emma's innocent observations providing the missing puzzle pieces, a pattern was emerging that revealed the true scope of Rodriguez's organization. "We had 6 unsolved arsons with similar characteristics," Santos whispered to her lieutenant, who had joined her in the packed courtroom. "All involved single-family homes in quiet neighborhoods. All had accelerant patterns consistent with deliberate destruction of evidence. All had families that barely survived, and all had children who reported seeing strangers in their homes before the fires started." Emma's detailed description of the operation in her basement was providing investigators with their first clear picture of how Rodriguez's network functioned. The systematic rotation between houses, the sophisticated money processing equipment, the creation of false documentation. It painted a portrait of a criminal enterprise that had been operating with near impunity for years. "There were other people besides the big scary man," Emma continued, her small voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. "I heard at least 3 different voices downstairs, maybe 4. They had different jobs. One person was doing something with the papers, another was counting money, and someone else was mixing chemicals in bottles." Prosecutor Sarah Williams felt her case expanding exponentially as Emma's testimony revealed the true magnitude of what they were dealing with. This wasn't just a bank robbery case anymore. It was a RICO investigation involving interstate money laundering, witness intimidation, attempted murder, and a pattern of crimes that had victimized dozens of families across multiple jurisdictions. "Emma," Williams said carefully, "did you hear the people downstairs mention any names? Any places they talked about going?" Emma nodded solemnly, her memory proving remarkably detailed for a child who had been only 6 years old at the time. "The scary man called one of the others Carlos, and someone else was called Tiny, which was funny because the voice sounded really deep and big. They talked about other houses too, something about the Johnson place and the Martinez family, and how they needed to clean up after those jobs too." The courtroom erupted in whispers as the implications became clear. Rodriguez hadn't just targeted the Morrison family. He had been systematically victimizing innocent families throughout the city, using their homes as temporary bases for his money laundering operation, and then attempting to eliminate all witnesses through arson. Mike Chen stared at his partner with growing amazement as he realized that Rex's investigation of the bank robbery had uncovered something far more significant than anyone had imagined. The German shepherd's nose had led them not just to a bank robber's hideout, but to the nerve center of a criminal network that had been terrorizing families for years. Rex solved multiple cases simultaneously, Mike whispered to himself, his voice thick with pride and awe. "Every time I thought he was just being thorough, he was actually following trails that connected to other crimes, other victims, other families that needed justice." Federal agents began arriving at the courthouse as word of the expanding investigation spread through law enforcement channels. FBI Special Agent Catherine Morrison,
no relation to Emma's family, despite the shared surname, took a position near the prosecution table, her presence signaling that the case had now attracted federal attention due to its interstate implications. The money laundering operation appears to have crossed state lines, Agent Morrison noted to Williams during a brief sidebar conference. We've been tracking similar patterns in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. If this is the same network, we're looking at a federal case involving millions of dollars in processed criminal proceeds. Rodriguez's desperation was becoming increasingly dangerous as he realized that his entire criminal empire was crumbling in real time. The massive defendant was no longer just facing charges for bank robbery and arson. He was looking at federal racketeering charges that could result in multiple life sentences. "This is insane," Rodriguez shouted from the defendant's table, his voice cracking with hysteria. "You're going to believe some little kid's fairy." The heavy oak doors of courtroom 4A swung open as Fire Marshal Thomas Stevens entered. His weathered uniform was immaculate, silver insignia glinting under the lights, each medal earned in the service of truth. Summoned from an arson scene across the city only 2 hours earlier, Stevens carried a file that had gathered dust for 2 years, evidence everyone, including himself, had missed. Bailiff Tom Jackson's voice rang out. "The court calls Fire Marshal Thomas Stevens." Stevens took the stand with the steady bearing of a man used to hard truths. Judge Patricia Hartwell noted his composure. Prosecutors valued witnesses like this, experienced, factual, unswayed by theatrics. "Marshal Stevens," Prosecutor Sarah Williams began, "you investigated the fire at 1247 Maple Street 2 years ago. What did you find?" Stevens opened his file with practiced care. "The Morrison house fire was among the most suspicious of my career. Multiple ignition points in the basement, deliberate accelerant patterns, and chemical compounds with no place in a family home." In the gallery, 8-year-old Emma Morrison's eyes widened. Beside her, Rex, the German shepherd who had saved her, perked up, as if remembering the acrid air of that night. Stevens displayed photos of burn patterns. "We identified gasoline, industrial solvents, and compounds used for document destruction and evidence elimination." A ripple moved through the courtroom. Williams leaned in. "Chemical compounds, can you be specific?" "We found residues tied to money laundering operations, substances to treat currency, erase serial numbers, age documents. No legitimate household use." The whispers swelled. This was no random blaze. It was the destruction of a criminal operation hidden beneath the Morrisons' home. Defendant Marcus Tank Rodriguez's face drained of color. "The timing was damning," Stevens continued. "The fire was 3 days after the first national bank robbery. Not coincidence, criminal planning." Mike Chen, Rex's handler, felt vindicated. The dog's urgency that night had meant more than fire. He'd scented crime itself. "Did you work with canine units?" Williams asked. "I did. Officer Rex here located the trapped child. What struck me was that he didn't flee from the toxic fumes. He seemed to know something criminal was underway. His nose detected accelerants we missed in early testing." Rex's tail thumped softly. Stevens held up preserved samples. "They match compounds for large-scale currency processing and document alteration." Williams pressed the point. "In your opinion, was this fire deliberate?" "Absolutely. It was set to destroy evidence of money laundering." Each word was another nail in Rodriguez's case. But the revelations weren't over. Special Agent Catherine Morrison of the FBI rose. "Your Honor, we've uncovered corruption within the city's fire investigation unit. Inspector David labeled the fire accidental. He omitted ignition points, accelerants, chemical residues." Gasps erupted. Judge Hartwell's voice sharpened. A public official falsified a report on a fire that nearly killed a family. Yes, Your Honor. Detective Frank Russo was paid $23,000 to ignore leads. Evidence clerk Maria Santos took $15,000 to lose samples. Emma clutched her mother's hand, struggling to grasp how protectors could help those who meant her harm. Chen murmured to her, Rex was right from the start. He knew. The FBI's sweep was already underway. Raids, arrests, seizures. At least 12 city employees were on Rodriguez's payroll, Morrison reported. Until we purge the system, the Morrisons remain in witness protection. Jennifer Morrison wept. The fire should have sparked an immediate probe. Instead, officials buried the truth. Morrison looked to Rex. His alerts were perfect. He marked accelerants, chemical compounds, criminal activity. He was more accurate than human investigators, compromised by bribes. The network began collapsing as associates turned on each other. We expect 30 more arrests in 48 hours, Morrison said. Emma whispered to Rex, You knew the bad men were trying to hurt us, and you never gave up. The dog's dark eyes met hers, steady and sure. Then, the breaking point. Rodriguez, who had sat rigid all morning, crumpled forward. I can't do this anymore, he muttered to his attorney. The room fell still. Judge Hartwell leaned forward. Mr. Rodriguez, do you wish to speak? He looked across to Emma, no hatred in her gaze, only clarity. She's right. Everything she said is true. Gasps filled the air. I robbed First National Bank. I stole $2.3 million. I used the Morrison basement to process and hide it. I picked them because they were quiet, clean, perfect cover. I broke in, set up my operation, planned to be gone in a week. Emma listened intently. Rex stayed alert beside her. But the equipment overloaded the wiring. The fire started accidentally, and I let it burn. I thought it would wipe the evidence. I told myself they'd get out, but I didn't care if they didn't. Judge Hartwell's voice was like steel. You knowingly allowed a fire that endangered innocent lives? Yes, I valued my safety over theirs. He glanced at Emma again. Seeing her today, so brave, made me realize what a monster I became. Emma's reply was soft but piercing. You don't have to be a monster anymore. You can choose to be good now. Rodriguez broke down, sobbing. I targeted you, Emma. I tried to kill you and your parents, but you survived. Now, you're braver than I've ever been. He protected her when the system failed. Emma slipped from her seat, walking to him with Rex at her side. Thank you for telling the truth. Now other families will be safe. Rodriguez looked down at the child he had meant to destroy and felt something shift. Justice here wasn't born of revenge. It came from a child's courage and a dog's unwavering loyalty. The oak doors of courtroom 4A closed with a finality that seemed to lock away 2 years of nightmares. In the quiet that followed Rodriguez's confession, only a few remained. Emma Morrison knelt beside Rex, her arms wrapped around the German shepherd's neck. A bond forged in fire, tempered by time. For the first time in years, she let herself just be a child, drawing comfort from the steady heartbeat of her rescuer. You remember me, don't you? She whispered. Jennifer Morrison approached, tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, honey. I tried to protect you from the memories, but you were right about everything. Emma's gaze was steady. Some truths are too important to keep buried. Officer Rex taught me that heroes face scary things so others don't have to. Mike Chen stepped forward, voice breaking. You were perfect, boy. Every instinct, every choice. Rex's tail wagged. He'd never needed praise, but hearing it from his partner made the moment whole. Judge Hartwell descended from the bench. Officer Rex, she said formally. This court apologizes for dismissing your testimony. Your instincts and dedication were superior to human investigation. You have saved lives and brought justice to those who thought they were beyond its reach. As marshals led Rodriguez away, he paused to face Emma. "Thank you for showing me real courage. Everyone can choose to be good," she replied simply. Outside, the media swarmed, but the family kept their distance. "Emma's courage deserves to be told," Agent Morrison told reporters, "but so does her right to be a child again." The community rallied, meal trains, security patrols, neighbors vowing never to fail the Morrisons again. Calls poured in from police agencies asking about Rex's retirement. Chief Amanda Rodriguez summed it up. "That dog's nose is worth more than some detectives' entire careers." Healing began quickly. Emma started counseling, learning that her voice had power. Rex, too, seemed lighter, his tail wagging more often. The police headquarters assembly hall was transformed into a cathedral of law enforcement. Flags lined the walls. Media stood discreetly at the edges. Chief Rodriguez took the lectern. "We honor courage that transcends species and age. K-9 Officer Rex, 6 years of distinguished service, 247 suspects tracked, 89 rescues, a 94% success rate." Applause thundered. Emma clapped until her hands reddened. "His greatest achievement," the chief continued, freely. National coverage hailed Rex the hero and Emma's courage. A community fundraiser surpassed $150,000. An anonymous donor established Emma's education fund. Emma and Rex's new fire safety program began reaching schools statewide, pairing her story with his demonstrations to teach children how to recognize danger and seek help. Therapists cited their bond as a model for animal-assisted recovery. Federal agencies discussed bringing Rex in on special consultations. As the chief placed a medal around Rex's neck and handed Emma a certificate of courage, the room rose to its feet. "They show us that real heroes come in all ages and species," she said. The Morrisons' new home on Elm Street symbolized a fresh start. Rex roamed the backyard freely, no longer kenneled but living as both legend and family. Emma's therapy sessions turned into celebrations of progress. She now spoke to other children about bravery. Rex's health improved under premium care. The hip injury that once sidelined him was managed with new treatments. Mike Chen, now head of canine training, taught handlers to trust their dog's instincts. Emma and Rex's school program spread statewide, credited with saving lives. The community, inspired by their courage, upgraded security and built stronger networks. Legal reforms from their case changed how courts handled child and canine testimony. Jennifer Morrison became an advocate for crime victims. "We almost lost everything," she told people, "but we learned love, truth, and courage can overcome anything." Emma, once shy and silent, now told packed classrooms, "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing, even when you are. And when someone believes in you, you can be braver than you ever thought possible." On a warm evening, Jennifer and David watched from the porch as Emma and Rex played in the yard, the sun setting behind them. The family that had nearly been destroyed had been remade stronger than ever. The healing was complete, but their heroism would live on, inspiring others to find courage, speak truth, and protect the innocent. The mahogany panel chambers of the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Crime and Federal Government Surveillance were unusually full. Lawmakers who often skipped routine oversight sessions had come to hear testimony on a case that had redefined how the justice system valued non-traditional witnesses. Chairman Michael Torres gavelled the hearing to order. Before him sat FBI Special Agent Catherine Morrison, Police Chief Amanda Rodriguez, Professor Janet Martinez of Georgetown Law, and at the center, a graying German shepherd named Rex, law school study and the cover star of Time, Newsweek, and National Geographic. Congresswoman Sarah Martinez highlighted the stakes. Officer Rex's nose detected what human investigators, corrupt officials, and lab tests missed. Replicating that capability nationwide could revolutionize law enforcement. Professor Martinez told the panel, "We're teaching future lawyers that dismissing evidence because of its source, not its reliability, is a fundamental error." Emma Morrison's courage had inspired child advocacy reforms. Now 9, she addressed the subcommittee via video to protect her privacy. Officer Rex never stopped believing in the truth. Sometimes kids see things adults miss, and sometimes dogs know things people don't understand. Everyone should be listened to when they're trying to help. Her words had become a rallying cry. Rex's image appeared on stamps and commemorative coins. Schools adopted Safety Heroes programs in 47 states, combining Emma's story with lessons on personal safety and the work of police dogs. The case's fallout led to stronger federal oversight of local law enforcement, protocols for evidence handling, and reforms to protect whistleblowers. The Morrisons, once private citizens, became advocates, speaking on family resilience and donating over $200,000 in fees to victim assistance programs. Mike Chen testified, "Rex teaches other dogs how to think, process complex scent environments, and communicate their findings. His impact will last decades." Emma's opportunities expanded. Scholarships, leadership programs, and a national network of pen pals, children who had witnessed crimes and found courage in her story. "Being scared is normal," she told them. "Being silent when someone needs help is not." The ripple effect touched everyone. Emma's poise and moral clarity impressed public servants twice her age. Dr. Sarah Chen, her psychologist, observed, "She's seen the worst humans can do and chosen to believe in the best." Rex thrived as a trainer and mentor, his patience legendary. Dr. Jennifer Walsh noted, "He's not just a police dog, he's a teacher and an example of integrity." Mike Chen, now head of the Canine Division, restructured training to treat dogs as partners, not tools. "We're students of our dogs now," said Chief Rodriguez. "Our success rates have risen across every metric." Jennifer Morrison became a fire safety advocate, helping pass stronger arson investigation laws in 12 states. Judge Patricia Hartwell, who had once dismissed Rex's evidence, now led judicial seminars on evaluating unconventional but reliable testimony. The Maple Street neighborhood transformed into a model of community vigilance and support. "What Rodriguez tried to destroy made us stronger," said neighbor Bob Martinez. Even defense attorney Robert Hayes switched careers to child advocacy. Prosecutor Sarah Williams now is to create an environment where truth can emerge, no matter how unconventional. Quote unquote, in prison, Rodriguez joined victim impact programs. In a letter to Emma, he admitted, "I thought power came from hurting people, but you proved real power comes from helping." Unquote. 6 months later, in a Chicago federal conference room, leaders from law enforcement, child advocacy groups, schools, and philanthropies launched the Rex and Emma Foundation. David Morrison announced, "This will ensure the lessons we learned are never forgotten, and that families in similar situations have the support we wished we'd had." Unquote. The $50 million endowment came from seized criminal assets, private foundations, and individual donors inspired by their story. The foundation's mission? support child witnesses and K-9 units in their shared pursuit of truth and justice. Clearly, NHR, in Justice's year of their GAN, as honorary president, Emma insisted on educational programs about police dogs' role in community safety. Some heroes are big like Daddy, she told the board. Some are small like me, and some have 4 legs and the best noses in the world. Unquote. Rex, the Foundation's chief canine advisor, lay quietly beside her, his calm dignity matching the moment. The Foundation's school curriculum blended Emma's testimony with police dog demonstrations. Children remember Emma's story because she's one of them, said Program Director Dr. Lisa Thompson, and they're fascinated by Rex's abilities. Together, they inspire safety and action. Clearly, in HR, professional training programs adopted Rex's techniques nationwide. International delegations came to observe the Rex Protocol, a new philosophy of human-canine partnership. We're training partnerships now, Mike Chen explained, not just handlers. Unquote. She run the forum, the Maple Street neighborhood's post-trauma resilience became a national case study in community-based crime prevention. The Morrisons' healing journey inspired their work. We almost lost everything, Jennifer said at a fundraising dinner, but we gained something more valuable: proof that love, truth, and courage can overcome any adversity. Unquote. Legal reforms established in Rex's vindication reshaped courtroom handling of canine and child testimony. The case became required reading in law schools. National protocols improved transparency and prevented local corruption. Unquote. The personal bonds endured. Mike Chen and the Morrisons became family, sharing holidays and milestones. Unquote. Not Tordley again. Judge Hartwell sent Emma birthday cards. Emma and Mike's joint presentations drew standing ovations. Heroes aren't born special, Mike told one audience. They become special by doing the right thing when it's hard. Unquote. Again, Rex remained the family's guardian and the Foundation's symbol. His presence at events reminded everyone, protecting families and shaping justice for generations to come. The autumn sun spilled gold across Elm Street Park as hundreds gathered for the first annual Heroes Day. What began as a neighborhood barbecue had grown into a citywide celebration, honoring the courage that had changed so many lives. Tables brimmed with food, children played on upgraded playgrounds, and conversations hummed with the sense that this was a community transformed. Emma Morrison, now 9, moved confidently through the crowd. The shy, traumatized child from a year ago was gone. In her place stood a poised young advocate. She wore a blue dress matching Rex's ceremonial collar, her dark eyes alight with purpose. From a small stage by the gazebo, she addressed the crowd. This day isn't just about what happened in the courthouse, she said clearly. It's about what happens every day when people choose to help each other, protect each other, and tell the truth even when it's hard. Rex sat beside her, dignified despite his graying muzzle, eyes bright as ever. Visitors had come from across the country, officers eager to meet the dog who'd changed canine operations, educators using Emma's story in classrooms, and families inspired by the Morrisons' journey. David Morrison summed it up simply. Rex didn't just save Emma's life, he saved our family's future. Mike Chen, now head of the National K-9 Training Center, had seen his programs set new global standards. Mike's protocols, built on Rex's methods, have improved detection rates, apprehensions, and officer safety, Police Chief Amanda Rodriguez told the crowd. The neighborhood had become a model of vigilance and mutual support. Mrs. Henderson, presenting Emma a key to the city, said, "When good people stand together, they can overcome any evil. Their impact stretched nationwide. Rex's case had set legal precedents for canine testimony. Emma's Safety Heroes program had reached over 2 million children, and their bond had become a template for animal-assisted trauma therapy. As evening approached, Emma found a quiet moment by the memorial garden for crime victims. Stroking Rex's fur, she whispered, "We helped make sure bad people can't hurt families, and we showed everyone that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing anyway." Rex's tail wagged gently. The first threatening letter arrived one November morning, slid under the Morrisons' front door. "Your daughter should have died in that fire. Next time, she won't be so lucky." The FBI responded immediately. Special Agent Catherine Morrison arrived within 30 minutes. "We believe this is tied to associates of Rodriguez's network still at large," she told them. "Some are seeking revenge for Emma's testimony." Emma's courage was tested again. Her hand trembled on Rex.
This time, we have lots of other people helping.
Rex's instincts sharpened overnight. "He's showing the drive of a dog half his age," noted Dr. Jennifer Walsh after a veterinary check. Mike Chen took extended leave to coordinate security. "They're family to me," he told Morrison. "I'm not letting anyone hurt them." The community rallied, neighbors organizing patrols and businesses donating equipment. "Emma's our hero," Bob Martinez declared. "Anyone who wants to hurt her goes through all of us." A multi-agency task force formed, combining local police, federal agents, and tactical teams. The FBI director warned publicly, "Any attempt to harm this child will face the full force of federal law." Emma, calm but resolute, told child advocacy specialists, "The bad men are trying to scare me because they know I told the truth. Officer Rex taught me you can be scared and brave at the same time." In December, after months of surveillance, agents launched simultaneous raids on 12 locations across 3 states. 17 suspects linked to the conspiracy were arrested. Evidence tied them to crimes across multiple jurisdictions. At dawn, Agent Morrison stood in the Morrisons' living room. "It's over," she said simply. "The threat has been eliminated." Emma hugged Rex tightly. "When good people work together, the bad people can't win," Mike Chen reflected. Rex didn't just protect her. He raised the bar for everyone on that detail. The Morrisons now considered Mike and Rex part of their family. "They've stood with us through the worst times," David said. "That kind of loyalty lasts forever." The neighborhood, galvanized by the crisis, formalized watch programs and emergency communication systems. Mrs. Henderson told residents, "We've learned we can protect each other. That lesson will serve us well." Federal prosecutors announced the operation as the largest organized crime takedown in the region's history. $50 million in seized assets, long prison sentences, and a dismantled network. Through it all, Emma and Rex's educational work continued. The Safety Heroes curriculum was now in all 50 states. "They show children that heroes come in all ages and species," said Dr. Lisa Thompson. Mike Chen received the Presidential Medal of Freedom at the White House, with Rex honored alongside him. "Their dedication to truth and protection of the innocent has inspired a nation," President Martinez said. Jennifer Morrison, once sure the fire was the worst thing that could happen, told a documentary crew, "It was actually the beginning of the best chapter. We learned who we are, and how much good can come from refusing to let evil win." The security measures built during the crisis remained, ensuring the family's safety. That Christmas, snow fell softly outside their window as Emma sat beside Rex. "Do you think we'll have more adventures?" she asked.
Rex's tail wagged. Their bond, forged in fire, tested by threat, had proven unbreakable. The battle was over, but the legacy they had built together was just beginning. The courtroom was so still, you could hear the hum of the lights. Fire Marshal Stevens, a man with 28 years of service, sat straight in a witness chair. His voice was steady, but carried the weight of what he'd uncovered. Accelerant patterns on the porch, residue that matched samples taken from a suspect's own storage unit, and a point of origin that aligned perfectly with Emma Morrison's account. "This wasn't an accident," he said, eyes sweeping the jury. "The fire was deliberately set, and the accelerant, diesel mixed with an industrial solvent, was placed exactly where Emma described." Gasps broke the silence. On the defense table, Michael Rodriguez's hands tightened around his pen. Emma was called next. Small in stature but unwavering, she recounted the night of the fire, Rex barking, the smell of chemicals, the shadowed figure fleeing. She didn't embellish, she didn't falter. When she was done, the judge let the room breathe again. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Rodriguez asked to address the court. Against his attorney's protests, he confessed, not just to the arson, but to the wider network it was meant to silence. He named names, officials, officers, community leaders tied to crimes no one had dared investigate. He spoke of threats to his own family, of orders handed down from people who thought themselves untouchable. By the time he finished, the jury wasn't just hearing a case about a single fire. They were witnessing the first crack in a wall of corruption that had loomed over the city for years. The verdict was swift, guilty on all counts. Rodriguez would spend the rest of his life in prison, but the shockwaves of that day went far beyond him. Within weeks, national media had taken hold of the story. Congress invited Emma, her parents, Fire Marshal Stevens, and canine handler Mike Chen to testify about gaps in witness protection, canine evidentiary value, and community response. Emma's quiet confidence, speaking beside Rex, became a symbol for resilience. Legislation followed, the Rex Act, recognizing trained canines as credible detection witnesses under specific circumstances. The Emma Morrison Child Witness Protection Expansion, giving young witnesses enhanced security and trauma support. Mike Chen's training protocols, modeled on Rex's methods, were adopted nationwide. Police departments saw detection accuracy climb, officer safety improve, and canine welfare prioritized like never before. The community itself transformed. Neighborhood watch programs expanded. Was personal and profound. Once withdrawn, she now spoke to classrooms and town halls, always with Rex at her side. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared," she told them. "It means you do the right thing anyway." A year later, Elm Street Park overflowed with people for the first annual Heroes Day. Booths lined the walkways, kids darted between them, and laughter wove through the autumn air. On the small stage, Emma stood in a blue dress that matched Rex's ceremonial color. "This day isn't just about what happened to me," she said, voice carrying over the crowd. "It's about what happens when communities protect each other, when we all decide the truth matters." Applause rolled like a wave. Among the crowd were officers from across the country, teachers using Emma's story in their lessons, and families who'd been inspired to adopt retired canines. David Morrison's words captured the mood. "Rex didn't just save my daughter, he saved our family's future." As dusk approached, Emma found a quiet corner by the memorial garden for victims of crime. She rested her hand on Rex's fur. "We helped make sure bad people can't hurt families like ours," she whispered. Rex's tail thumped softly against the grass. The peace didn't last. One November morning, a letter slid under the Morrisons' front door. "Your daughter should have died in that fire. Next time, she won't be so lucky. The FBI arrived within minutes. Special Agent Catherine Morrison's face was grim. "We believe this is from associates of the network Rodriguez exposed. Some are still out there, and they're angry." Emma's hand found Rex's collar. "Officer Rex protected me once," she said quietly. "He'll protect me again. And this time, we have even more people helping." Rex seemed to sense the shift. His energy sharpened, patrols with Mike Chen becoming focused and deliberate. The neighborhood organized night watches, local businesses donated surveillance systems, and law enforcement presence doubled. The FBI formed a multi-agency task force, local police, federal agents, tactical teams, committed to ending the threat. Any attempt to harm this child will face the full force of federal law, the Bureau's director announced. In December, the operation struck. Before dawn, raids swept through 3 states, 17 arrests, weapons, cash, and evidence tied to multiple crimes. By evening, Agent Morrison stood in the Morrisons' living room. "It's over," she said simply. "They can't touch you now." Emma dropped to her knees beside Rex, hugging him so tightly. Received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, Rex honored alongside him. Jennifer Morrison told a documentary crew, "The fire felt like the worst thing that could happen, but it was the start of something better. We learned how much good can come from refusing to let evil win." That Christmas, snow fell gently outside as Emma sat beside Rex, the tree lights reflecting in his dark eyes. "Do you think we'll have more adventures?" she asked. Rex's tail wagged once, steady and sure. Whatever came next, they had already proven the truth. Courage, loyalty, and community could outlast any threat. Their story would live on, not just in laws and training manuals, but in the countless lives they'd touched. Rex and Emma's story reminds us of something we dog lovers have always known in our hearts. There's a magic in the connection between humans and dogs that goes deeper than words. German Shepherds, with their unwavering loyalty and intuitive understanding, seem to possess an almost supernatural ability to sense what we need, often before we know it ourselves. Their bond wasn't built overnight. It was forged through trust, mutual respect, and countless quiet moments where Rex simply knew what Emma needed. That's the beauty of these relationships. They're not about commands or control, but about genuine communication between 2 souls who speak different languages, yet understand each other perfectly. Every dog owner has felt this connection in small ways. The gentle nudge when you're sad, the protective stance when something feels wrong, the way your dog seems to read your very thoughts. Rex's extraordinary abilities were really just an extension of what every loving dog tries to give us. Complete devotion and an unbreakable promise to be there when we need them most. If you've ever wondered how to strengthen that special connection with your own companion, there are gentle, science-based approaches that honor the intelligence and emotional depth dogs bring to our lives. Sometimes, the most meaningful conversations happen without a single word being spoken. Your dog is already trying to tell you so much. Perhaps it's time to listen with your heart.